Hey guys, this is Danny Johans and welcome to another video. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about composition. Composition is all about framing your drawing within a page and how to make your subject look aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to draw some sketches today and show you how you could frame your drawing in a certain way that helps all the elements of the drawings work together to make a composition that works and is a good way to show your drawing skills. There are many ways with which you can compose your drawing. I normally like to sometimes draw a boundary if I'm trying to define the edges of the map for my sketch. And I would typically place my drawing somewhere within the perimeter of these boundaries within that space. So I would leave out at least this much percentage of the paper. You don't want your drawing to be overly confusing where there are multiple things going on in different corners of the sketch, like this, or like this, like that, like that. That could be too confusing for the viewer. In case you're drawing architecture, when you're making a drawing, you always have to think about what key element of the drawing is going to draw the attention and what do you want to divert the viewer's attention to in your sketch. Typically, I like to have it sort of, whether it's a horizontal or vertical space, keep it within this space or somewhere around that area. It could be somewhere around here. And then everything kind of comes out of that. All the lines kind of converge toward that, whether it's that one or this one or here in the center. But the idea is to have something that holds the entire sketch together, as opposed to have it totally spread out in a way that becomes a chaos of ideas, and there's really no place that you're trying to draw attention to. So the number one rule, or my advice to you for composing a drawing, is to choose where you want to draw the attention to, and then everything kind of spreads out from there. There are many ways with which you can play with that to get a good composition that works for your imagery. Even if you have a photograph that you're drawing from and you don't know what part of the picture you want to keep in and what part of the picture you want to leave out, you have to look for what draws your eye, and that's where you start from. That's always got to be your starting point. If you've seen some of my drawings on this channel, I always draw outwards from the central piece, and I will demonstrate that today as well in one of the sketches that I will show. So if I were to try to draw something out of this image, I would try to keep the central building in and maybe some of these streets, but you don't have to draw every single building and every single detail that you see here on the periphery of this photograph. You need to sort of pick and choose what you'll keep in and what you would pay less attention to, and that's composition. So it really comes down to you how you want to compose your image. But one thing that I would definitely keep in mind at all times is think about what you want to be the thing that holds the attention of the viewer, and draw everything out from there. So let me give you another example of, let's say, a vertical frame. Like you may have seen, I like to draw a lot of towers. So what I do is I always like to have at least some space at the top and some space at the bottom left for me to fill out some of the other details, or maybe even leave it blank. So you would see that a tower or whatever I'm trying to draw would always be in some kind of this setting. You always want to keep a balance when it comes to your composition. You have to pick what position on the piece of paper your subject's going to take, and then you have to strike a balance. If you want to keep everything symmetrical, you still have to find a way to find some kind of a balance in how you display the different elements on the screen. So if I were to draw, let's say, this image right here of the Kremlin, this is a horizontally elongated frame. But you have to look at it and think about, okay, so what is the center of attention? There's so many things going on here. The two things that I feel like are gonna hold the weight of my sketch are this dome over here and then the tallest tower, or the most dominant tower of the Kremlin. So these are the two things that I'm gonna draw my drawing around, and that's gonna hold the weight of the whole sketch. So first of all, what you want to do is decide how far away you want to be from the boundaries, and I think for something like this, it's good to leave some space at the edges, and think about where you're gonna place the dome and the tower. So I don't want the tower to go any further than this line over here, so I know that it's gonna be somewhere around here. And the dome being somewhere over here. And everything sort of builds around that. So that you have enough space at the edges, and it gives you a perfectly balanced drawing with a composition that works. Now you can go in whichever level of detail you want to finish the drawing, but the idea is to understand how to use the paper in a way it doesn't feel awkward and captures every major element of the sketch that you're trying to show. So let me show another example, and we can go in a little bit more detail this time. I'm gonna draw a bigger boundary here. So this is a picture that I have chosen, and again you can see here that the tower in the center is quite obviously the key figure in the sketch, which, by the way, again, if you're thinking about what photograph to pick for a sketch, always go for one which has an element that draws the attention and is interesting, and something that you can build your sketch around or a photograph around. So I will draw a pencil sketch this time, and so this is going to be the space that our tower is going to occupy, and we're going to come out of here like this, and a little bit of drawing on this side, and the further away that we will go from the center, the less detailed our drawing is going to be. So the most amount of time that I will spend while drawing this drawing is going to be inside this box, and then as I go a little bit further, my attention to detail will get lower and lower. Like you can see in this sketch that I drew just recently, looks very similar to the sketch that we're drawing today. And then when we are drawing in this space at the very periphery, there's going to be minimal attention to detail. So you can call it the rule of three, the Danny Johans rule, whatever, or maybe somebody already has put a name on it, I don't know, but this is typically what I do. So the level of detail always goes from the most in here to a little bit less or medium to low, and that's how you should compose your drawing, or if you're thinking about what level of attention to give to the different elements. Let's start to draw, and again I'm doing a rough sketch, so things are going to look a little bit casual. As you can see, the further away I'm moving from the drawing, I would care less and less about the attention to detail of these elements. And this is of course supposed to be in its nature a very raw sketch. Because your goal should be never to draw things perfectly, especially when it comes to things that are not the center of your focus. You draw some buildings down here, there's a bus here, and then this, of course, whatever is here ends up being totally outside our box. So this is barely going to be mentioned here, and we're not even gonna put much else focus into that, but we're just going to try to master our central figure, the central tower, as well drawn as possible. Try to capture its scale versus the rest of the buildings, which is ultimately the goal. And if you're trying to draw a quick sketch, so the goal here will always be about dividing focus, dividing paper space, and how everything is supposed to emanate from that central figure. One more thing that you need to keep in mind while dealing with composition of your drawings is if you're trying to draw a perspective drawing, which most architectural drawings have, there's always going to be all these reference lines that you would have to draw, whether it's a 2-point perspective or a 3-point perspective, whichever that may be. You're gonna have to deal with all of these vanishing points. So keep in mind that all of that needs to fit in a way that doesn't make it awkward for you. Sometimes you just have to maybe play with it where your lines kind of go off screen. So keep that in mind as well. That's why it's important to have a basic understanding of perspective. Use your instincts, use your ability to understand how perspective works to make sense from a visual point of view. Even if you're dealing with an irregular set of boundaries, your understanding of composition and your expertise of dealing with space would guide you through this process and help you pick a composition that works perfectly for your drawing. So those were a few thoughts on composition and a few nuggets that you guys may want to think about while starting to draw a sketch or getting into drawing. The more you draw and the more time you spend, the better your understanding of composition is going to get. Thanks for being part of this video and watching it all the way to the end. I really appreciate your time, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.